So, hello, everybody. We're going to be doing an interview with Steven Sharif, who is the creative director for Intrepid. They're the people who are making Ashes of Creation. If you would like to introduce yourself, tell them about what you do and who you are.
I would love to. I'm happy to be back with all of the goblins in chat and chatting with you, Thor. My name is Steven Sharif. I'm the creative director and founder of Intrepid Studios, making Ashes of Creation.
All righty. Let's see. Trying to get my character into a spot. I'm not going to die. So I've got a whole list of questions here. We've got a whole bunch of different categories. So to start us off, we've got PvP, caravans, artisan systems, guilds, NPC nodes, UI, or miscellaneous. I'd actually like to know which one you would want to start with first. There's a lot.
I'm cool. Yeah, I was about to say that's a lot. That's a lot.
We'll go through a few of them on each one.
Yeah, wherever you want to start, I'm cool with. You can ask any question under the sun. No topic off limits. Perfect. Happy to chat about anything.
Yeah, we've collected with a whole bunch of these, knowing that we probably won't get through all of them, but it's good to talk about and have that there. So I think we'll start with PvP then. So a number of people in the community have been asking about dueling. It's something we really want to do. We've had to go out to the lawless areas, like the areas where PvP is just enabled, in order to duel, because we don't really want to kill the other person. We want to have it kind of an experience like you would have in, say, World of Warcraft with /duel. And then that would allow us to get the other person to 1 HP, and then there's no loss, there's no EXP loss or anything like that. So we go to the the lawless areas, so it's a reduced rate of drop for their XP. Is there a plan to put a dueling system in?
There definitely is a plan for a dueling system. It hasn't been super high on our priority. And the reason for that, obviously, is that in an alpha, you want to try to stand up and service most of the core loops as quickly as you can, right? And while dueling is definitely, I think, a great system and that we have plans to introduce, it doesn't really satisfy the core loop system. But I do believe that dueling is scheduled to be implemented sometime within the first couple of months of Phase 3. So that is something that is high priority for Phase 3.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. That's really good to hear, actually. Are there any plans to update PvP flagging to prevent accidental corruption? A lot of the times what will happen is somebody will flag for PvP, you start attacking them, and it unflags them for PvP a couple seconds later, and then you kill them. Seconds later, and then you kill them, and you get corrupted. Sometimes it's referred to as corruption baiting. People use this as an abuse of the system. Is there any plans to update anything around like flagging, or maybe extend the flag when someone gets hit, or anything like that? And what are some of the problems you guys have seen where the system has failed currently?
So we actually did a little bit of an inspection on this the first week back from our break. The studio was on break from December 20th to January 6th. So we've been back in studio for the last couple of weeks. And in the first week, we saw that there was a lot of reports about people going red or going corrupt. And we found that a large majority of those cases through our analytics were when the projectile or the ability cast was done right as the flag was dropping on the opponent. And we didn't have clear enough, and we still don't have clear enough UI to indicate that you are kind of within that period of time where the flag of the opponent is going to drop. So what we prioritized on the combat side, which probably will land within the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks, is that as the player is beginning to deflag, you see the player's nameplate start to change color and start blinking, essentially, to indicate that, hey, be careful, you're now initiating that combat right when they're about to transition.
I like that.
That's cool. I like that a lot. Any type of visual indicator is actually a really good thing for that, because I think that's been a point of frustration. Like, that guy's flagged, get him, and now I'm corrupted. It's like, okay. So knowing that that's going to fall off is going to help a lot.
For sure.
So here's one. In Guild Wars, combatants are often getting help from the outside, non-guildies. Can flagging be changed so that it becomes guild versus guild only? Are there any plans to change guild versus guild to make this more actually that guild versus that guild?
That's a good question.
So this is something that I was thinking about over the break as I was playing with the different guilds that I'm secretly a part of. And I noticed, perhaps the right approach here would be that we kind of have a silent flagging system that lives with the guild event, right? So if you're in a guild war, or if you're in a node war, or if you're in a caravan event where you kind of have the alignment system pitting two groups against each other, that in the background, when those enemy combatants interact with one another, they receive a silent flag, something that players can't see, right? But they're already engaged with each other in combat as a result of the event system. And so if they have that flag on them and an outside participant, let's say, heals them or buffs them, then they get flagged for PvP using the flagging system. And that's to kind of prevent, I think, outside pocket healers or pocket buffers from being able to participate with impunity in those sanctioned alignment events. So that's something that the PC team is going to be looking into, probably not for the course of the next month or so, I would say.
That makes sense. Okay, cool. Ember Springs are the places where people actually respawn. Those are still currently being abused. Are there plans for a wider radius to help prevent killings on Ember Springs? And also, we found something kind of interesting, is when a person respawns, and they're supposed to be under protection for a little bit in that one spot, right? And that radius. Yep. Monster trading and monster pulls onto them still kill those players, which some players are now abusing to go and kill players right as they respawn. What are the plans for changing Ember Springs? Have you guys had this on your radar? Are there anything that you want to do to change this mechanic?
So we were working before the break on a radius that would live around Ember Spring points, that essentially would be a very small radius of no combat, so combat immunity essentially. It was a little bit more we had some bugs with that we couldn't promote up from our dev streams, so we decided instead to do a simpler solution for the time being. That is the protection buff that extends any radius, time based on respawn. So once we have an opportunity, I think, to deal with some of the bugs of those protection radiuses around the Ember Springs, that implementation should be coming up from our dev stream within the next couple of weeks or so. Nice. And that's just not going to be only for Ember Springs. We're going to be looking at applying that perhaps towards the market areas and warehouse areas of the nodes as well. Because there can be certain activities that players are taking advantage of right now, as we still have a need to kind of refine our leashing behaviors, along with some other ability interactions that can cause players to get killed in those areas, which is not something we're trying to accomplish.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Let's see, for war declaration. Right now, when you want to declare war for guild versus guild, you just pop a scroll, immediately it allows combat. And we've seen some kind of really interesting mechanics of that, where people will be like, oh, all their crafters are out? Pop it, kill them instantly. Are there any plans for making this have some kind of a cool up, some kind of a counterplay, some understanding that a timer is going to go off? It kind of reminds me a little bit of like in EVE Online, you can go and bash a structure. That structure will then have a timer on it. Everybody knows when to form up later, and the defender gets the advantage of choosing the time, but the attacker gets the advantage of attacking that in the first place to make sure that they have to go and defend it. So there's a little bit of counterplay on both sides. This, it feels like there's not really any counterplay, but early days system. So what is the end plan for that, do you think?
Yeah, that's so. We have had for a very long time the kind of declaration phase that exists for multiple systems, or that we want to exist for multiple systems, not just guild wars, but node wars and node sieges and castle sieges. We even are supposed to have a small countdown phase for when an attacker joins a caravan event as well.
Really?
So that they can't just join in immediately. Yeah, that's something that we've thought about, where it's like a 5-second countdown for the attacker to join the phase. So those systems, I believe the Guild War Declaration phase is something that the systems team will be working on perhaps over the next couple of sprints. So I would be on the lookout for that to occur. We've definitely seen some not good interactions where it's kind of like, surprise, you're dead. Opportunity, and we want both sides to kind of be able to prepare for the engagement. But not only that, but in the Guild Wars systems, we're also looking to bring online some open world objectives that the Guild Wars can participate over during prime time as well. So this might be an objective that's like defending your warehouse storage or control the hill, or something that kind of gives a little bit more organized gameplay, objective-based gameplay around the Guild Wars systems as well.
That's good. I really like that.
And I noticed, a lot of people talked about like battlegrounds and whatnot. Our idea of battlegrounds is not an instance that you join and you rank in, so to speak, but rather these open world locations that become battlegrounds as a result of dynamic objective spawning whenever these types of Guild War or Node War events occur.
Yeah, because we really liked the idea of there's like a lumberjack PvP one that you can do where you're like, oh, whoever gets to the first number of trees first wins. But we noticed that there was like weird problems with this where it's like the attacker can get all of their dudes set up, they're all sitting there at a tree, and then they pop it and they just win. And you're like, okay. Like, it's like there's no counter.
For sure. Yeah. We've seen that. It's a little toxic, but it's definitely something that we've had planned for design. You know how it goes. Sometimes as you're working towards a deadline and you kind of have your MVP of a system, sometimes that MVP needs to become an MMVP, and then you start dropping the components of the feature that were intended. One of those for Guild Wars, of course, was the timer. That's something now we're catching up on.
Yeah, that's good.
That's sweet.
I think that's the biggest thing is a lot of people don't realize how in flux these systems are. Like a lot of people are used to this alpha, the term alpha being something that, oh, the game's going to come out in a week. And it's funny too, because I was playing it all day today and people were coming in there like, oh, isn't this already out? Like, isn't the alpha over? And I'm like, no, it's going to be a very long time.
No, that is a constant struggle. And, one of the things that I think is obviously we've talked about this in the past, and this is one of the risks, obviously not of kind of being transparent about the development process, but also being open with this stage of alpha, which is not typically done, is that there is a wide range of informed audience to uninformed audience. And depending on whose audience you are, it runs the gambit. For your audience, obviously they are very well informed with regards to the state of Ashes, the expectations of Ashes. But the wider that chamber becomes, it becomes a little bit more difficult to wrangle control of perception and kind of understanding in what we're trying to accomplish. So that's why I think it's just such a huge opportunity that you and other streamers that we've had, content creators and people on YouTube are able to kind of spread the word about what we're trying to accomplish with this development and what stage we're really in, and that people can just kind of watch along as we continue to develop through the alpha.
Cool. So let's move on to caravans. Since we've talked about PvP, caravans are a PvP system. It's one of the ones that I actually really like a lot right now. They feel more feature complete than I think any of the other PvP systems in the game. And it adds a nice risk versus reward for both sides, which is cool. To start off with that, are there intentions of adding more of a reward system for defending a caravan? Because right now, running up on a caravan that's about to be attacked, the only reason you would really defend it is if your rivals are the ones attacking it.
Yep.
Yeah. So the caravan system right now, one of the approaches for caravan construction is the ability to componentize, different elements of the vehicle itself, such as expanding the storage capacity, the turn radiuses, the speed, all these different components that have abilities on them as well. The long-term goal for that system is that there are two branches of content paths available. There are the highwaymen and the bulwarks of trade, right? And those two different paths are predicated on your successful participation with either attacking and destroying caravans or defending them. So as you progress within one of those content paths, you begin to gain access to different types of vendors who are part of those organizations that you can climb the ladder in, and those will grant you access to different types of potential components or economic rewards that then you will be able to utilize as part of either your ganking of those caravans or your defending of those caravans. So that's the kind of end goal of the caravan. What I would say is that you won't expect to see those two content branches be introduced until probably around the start of phase 3.
Cool. I like that a lot. I like the idea of having more of that. I'm glad to see too that there's so much planned for these. You know, caravans is such an interesting system, and it reminds me a lot of like hauling in Eve, or you know, that kind of high risk of like, I got to move this thing, move these materials or these goods to another area. But right now it's really so bare bones around that system. I'm interested to know what your guys' vision is. Sure. For transporting of goods, because currently right now it's mostly just filling up the caravan with materials commodities that you go and sell, and my character's inventory is so much larger than what a caravan is, so there's effectively no reason to transport anything via caravan. It's much worse than doing that. So what is the intended functionality there, or the goal, the vision?
So yeah, the first thing to think about with regards to caravans is this is probably one of our more intricate systems, obviously, right? And it's also a system that shares a lot with other systems. So it's a foundational system, right? From a vehicle perspective, there are obviously multiple uses of vehicle types within Ashes that are intended. There are siege vehicle systems, which can be very, very different depending on the type of vehicle that we're talking about. There is the naval vehicle system, which we're able to get an early look at with the use of rafts, but is intended to be much larger. And so obviously when it comes to systems architecture, you know, you don't want to create a bunch of bespoke systems for, you know, gameplay loops that share a lot in commonality. You want to kind of build them on more foundational, you know, systems that you can make versatile across different use cases or gameplay layers or gameplay loops. So we really need to nail it home and make it right with the caravan system itself, because it is that foundational approach. And there have been a lot of bugs that we've noticed. Obviously, it's been getting much, much better since October 25th. Yeah. There are still some more bugs that we need to focus on and get stood up in a good way. But to answer your question with regards to kind of trade and transit, you know, within the Riverlands itself, kind of being the major playable space within Alpha 2, Phase 2 right now, and Phase 1, it's difficult to simulate that diversity of resources because it is a single zone, a single biome. We don't want to make kind of Alpha 2 unique split within the Riverlands, right, to mimic or represent when the world is fuller. So as is, those limited resources really don't have a lot of relevance to transit across the nodes. But as the additional biomes and zones come online, and at the end of this month, we have a big glow up that's going to be brought up from our lower development streams up to production for the desert biome that includes, you know, I think like 6 or 7, or no, I'm sorry, it includes like 10 to 12 additional resource types within that biome that will then be interwoven into some of the existing recipe systems, and also have bespoke build locations and node resource requirements that are now going to make the need for transiting resources, not commodities, across the nodes in order to interact with those crafting benches and those buildings. So that is something that I think is really going to emphasize the need for trade and transit.
I love
That's going to be awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, transporting stuff, it also makes it so that those are a bigger target too. You know, if they're transporting lots of materials, that's like, ooh, I wonder what's in that, you know, and you get a bunch of people out to go and steal everything out of it.
And there is something to keep in mind as well about the economy of the game. You know, probably one of the most iterative systems that has to do with balance, the number of or quantity or rarity type, is going to be artisanship and economy. And so what I mean by that is, between phase 2 and phase 3, testers should expect to see some significant changes, and those changes will likely all land at once. That will kind of reevaluate the need of resources across all the recipes and all of the node buildings and all of the buy orders, to represent how the world is changing and how we've iterated on the system. That is something that's going to be pretty big and in flux. So testers should anticipate and prepare for that. We're going to see a lot of iteration there.
Cool. One of the things that we like to do on the server is we like to knock over caravans. Our guild is named Actual Pirates. It wasn't a joke. That's what we do. So we'll go and find caravans, we knock them over. But one of the things we ran into that's a problem is we won't attack people from our own nodes. We're not going to attack Halcyon members with their teal name, right? We're not going to attack people that are on our list of friendlies, because we have a list of allies and non-interference pacts with certain people inside of the server. But we can't see their names, their guild, or their node affiliation when they're piloting a caravan. And we have to get them to step out of the caravan so that we can see that. So I have to keep stopping somebody like, show your papers, right? Which is funny, but also kind of a clunky sort of experience. Are there plans to make that visible to for a caravan driver to be visible in that way?
Yeah, that's a UI nameplate treatment. I know that's been a request for probably the better part of a month right now. Mm-hmm. It's obviously a lower priority request when it comes to kind of the bugs that the UI team is churning through in the future feature work that they're doing to support sieges. I would expect that change will probably make it in sometime over the next sprint or two. Okay. And it is something that is a relatively easy change, and it should be across not just caravans, but your mount and any other vehicle that you're utilizing as well. You should be able to at least flag that. Now, of course, that can be customizable. It should be customizable, just like we allow customization of our other UI elements. But players will have by default the ability to see that.
Makes sense. Some people in chat are saying that's actually already fixed. We killed a caravan earlier today, and that guy wasn't in a guild, so I wasn't aware if that was the case. That's the only one that I've killed today. There was,
so
yeah.
It might actually already be. I might have accidentally thrown the UI team under the bus there, but they might. Yeah,
may actually already be. Fixed this last patch, I think. Okay, good. Yeah, we'd only killed one today, and it was a guy who wasn't in a guild, that wasn't in he didn't have a teal name, and he jumped out immediately when we showed up. So I was like, okay, here we go. All right, we're gonna move on to artisan systems. There's a lot in here, so many. So, gathering stuff. Are there any plans of locking materials of higher level spawning behind node levels? For example, journeyman materials would only spawn when there's, a city node has gotten to a certain point. Because one of the problems we're running into is on early level nodes, all of the normal stuff gets mined out, it naturally respawns, and it turns into higher level stuff.
That's actually a good idea.
Farmed. There's quite a lot of that happening around the server. The biggest problem was with mining specifically. So many things would turn into tin or higher level materials that people just couldn't do anything with. Iron specifically became a pain point as a result.
There's actually a couple. Well, I would separate those into two questions. So the second part of that question, which was in the early lifespan of a zone or the server, right now the artisanship service is not distinguishing a harvestable resource node with a tier type. That's an outstanding functionality that's required of the artisanship feature, which is for us to designate essentially a seed value that is a variable determined by world progression. As you described, one of those world progression predicates is node level. There are other types of predicates that can help to inform the dynamic world state. So on the artisanship service side, that's outstanding functionality that should be completed before we exit phase 2. So that will help with that in the future with areas that are getting densely populated with higher tier gatherables, because we're not distinguishing. On the first point of your question is whether or not we will actually dynamically adjust resource spawners within an area based off of that area's world state, such as predicated on node level, as you described. That is something that is currently planned, but also is not in from a systems perspective. This is called our land management score. Land management is essentially a part of the artisanship service that is intended to govern certain areas of the world, and based on two axes here, either a good land score, which can be informed by such things as advancement of civilization, such as node level, or the construction of buildings, or certain events successfully being completed. That can increase the rarity type. It can increase the tier type of a resource spawn, and it can increase the quantity and quality of the spawns that you receive in that area if the area is successfully completing these predicates that we value the score off of. Alternatively, if it is a undeveloped location, or if the resources are consistently being ran dry, if things in the future, we're going to be implementing this interstitial stage of adolescence for some of the trees that can yield lower amounts of resources, but if harvested, have a more detrimental effect on your gathering tool, but also the land management score. If you are essentially farming an area pretty hard, and this can be economic attacks against zones that you don't like as other players who may not be citizens of those zones, then that will influence the land management score in an adverse way, and reduce the types of tier 2 or tier 3 or higher gatherables. So to a degree, once that gets implemented, your objective of allowing the zone to kind of grow up with the nodes will be part of that system as well. The last thing I would say is when it comes to this resource management, we are missing a tool that allows us to have resources spawn within geographic locations that make natural sense. Right. So like right now, they just kind of all share a spawn point within the world, regardless of the location of that spawn point.
Okay.
We are going to be using, as part of our PCG tool, which is kind of an initial pass of the area, how we procedurally place these resource locations, and they will be tagged to house only certain types of resources predicated on that location type. So if it's within a cave, it's highly mineralized or metallized, right? If it's along a river, it's going to be more herbalistic or otherwise. So that's something else that's going to be added for resource gatherables as well.
I love that. I think it's a really cool option. Having those nodes make more sense makes, like, that's good, because one of the things that was always funny is, oh, this whole area respawned to iron. Time to move on. So like, yeah, no, that's good. So let's talk about the rarity system. This has ended up being kind of a pain point for a lot of people in the community. Is you have so many different rarities for something. You can get oak of, common, uncommon, then you've got rare, then you've got heroic, then you've got epic, then you've got legendary. This ends up being just kind of a mess of different materials in this. And because the crafting system is all or nothing right now, like if you need 20 of something and you've got like 10 legendary, you're going to go farm for another 40 hours till you get the other 10 legendaries, right? Is there any type of plan to make this so that there's a scaling slider of any kind? There's an incremental effect based on the rarity of the total materials, and we can just throw everything that we have at it instead of, all or nothing on that legendary. Because what I'm seeing in the economy a lot of the times for people is people will be like, oh, it's legendary or it's common. Common is so you mill it for XP. Legendary is because you're actually going to craft something out of it. And everything in between just ends up being clutter. Doesn't really matter very much.
Right.
That's not true.
So the way I believe we currently calculate it is as you contribute resources towards a particular craft or processing event, we find the average across the rarities that are committed to the recipe. So I believe technically that there are certain minimum thresholds you can reach. I believe like quality 70 or 71 would be at the legendary side of that. So if your averages committed exceeded that, you wouldn't have to commit wholly legendary resources. Is that what you're talking about?
With processing specifically. With crafting of other stuff, you can mix and match here and there, but not everything works that way, and processing definitely doesn't. So if I wanted to do, say, 250 logs,
yes,
they have to be, they have to be 250 of legendary.
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct. I don't have a good answer for that yet. I would have to confer with the artisanship team on that one.
Okay, I wasn't understanding the question.
I know that there have been some discussions about how we are going to be adjusting our processing. Right now, a lot of the processing, well, a lot of the artisanship in general is very functional, right? We have a lot of intentions to kind of change that system over the course of phase 3. But I would say that, as I said earlier, that's going to be a system that is highly iterative. So let me get back to you on that, and I'll chat with the artisanship team and get a follow-up answer for you.
Cool. Yeah, and I think just as a point for like the specific use case for this is, if you put 250 common oak in and you turn that into like lumber and you have a little bit of quality, it'll be 249 common lumber and 1 uncommon, and now you can't run the next job of 250. And you're like, oh. So that's a very good example
that is
feels bad.
That is definitely it's definitely a pain point. That sounds to me like some outstanding functionality that's required on the processing logic. So I would definitely say that's something that's going to change. We want to be able to give a little bit more granularity when it comes to those types of functions. So yeah, I would expect some changes there.
Cool. How do you guys plan on? Oh wait,
and I will say one other thing. I will say one other thing, by the way. I know that at least on the UX side, right, the user interface design of bag management and processing station UX, that is very, very placeholder. So we stood up a UX that services the gameplay loop, but it does not have any of the bells and whistles for readability and intuitiveness that you would expect to see in a proper UX approach. So I would say also be on the lookout for that. And
how was your break, by the way? How did you guys
do? Break was good. We definitely we rolled some dice on the development side. There was a week ahead of the December 20th release, and there were some outstanding change lists or submissions that were on a lower stream that in the final week, I think it was like Tuesday before the 20th, that I made an executive decision to pull that stream up and to try to polish the issues with it before our December 20th phase 2 launch. Which, of course, the more experienced and veteran developers out there will know, right?
No bugs, right?
That's a little bit of a chuck and duck, so to speak. But it definitely there was some instability on the 20th and throughout the break. We had some heroes that stayed behind to try to address some of those issues, and then to compound that. Obviously, we had such a high retention between phase 1 and phase 2, and we also had a lot of new players that were joining to help test phase 2. And so we made the decision to try to kind of double and in some cases triple what our server realm capacities were, which, as you scale something, of course, you will exacerbate known and existing issues and also discover new issues that you hadn't seen before. If some particular service now starts to get inundated that wasn't getting inundated before, we saw that significantly over the break with our social service, which governs party updates, experience received, chat. We were sending too much information across the network at such high rates that we were hitting some buffer overflows, and that was causing the service to kind of fall over.
It's very unpredictable.
I would log into our Grafana and I would take a look at our services graphs, and I would just see these spikes left and right with the social service, and I'm just like, oh God, not like this.
No, it's good. That's perfect. Yeah. It's definitely what you want to see, man.
Exactly. So that was something that we were dealing with, but I would say all in all, it was a great start to phase two. I think the important thing to note, like, phase two runs until May 1st, which is when phase three begins. And a lot of the stuff that we have on our roadmap we feel pretty confident are going to land in phase two. And we talked about this, not all of those things were going to be present at the start of phase two. They're going to be slowly introduced as they make their way through our QA branches and as they get kind of hardened and introduced on the production environment. We feel pretty confident that the majority of those are going to land. And if I were to look at that from a roadmap perspective, I would say we're probably going to hit about 80% of that roadmap, which is for us, and for most of the games I follow, pretty damn good.
Yeah, that is really good, honestly. The amount of throughput that's gone through so far, it's been really great. So here's an interesting one economy-wise, and I know that this phase has a lot of economy changes. You guys are paying attention to that quite a bit. How do you feel about the new player experience in the current economy of the game? Because one of the things that we're seeing and a lot of people are kind of worried about is this trend where the server starts progressing beyond basic materials and the newer player is left behind, where they have all these goods that they can no longer sell to anyone. Buy orders may still be possible, but we have buildings like the farm that produce tier 1 materials, so they largely become unnecessary for the new players' materials to do anything, and this creates a weird pocket. I saw the same thing before kind of in EVE Online in the very early days, and they ended up remedying that by making it so that all materials in the entire game are the base materials, and the different ways of mining them just produce more of the materials in higher risk situations. Even salvaging items would become those same materials. Tritanium, Mexilon, pyrite, things like that are the base structures of everything. With this, because there's tiers to materials, we have willow wood, you have oak wood, you have all these types of tiers, that base player falls away. So what do you think about the economy as it is? How do you feel that a new player is going to produce value as the systems progress forward? And what are your guys' plans to address this?
That's a good question, actually.
Yeah. So to a degree, what you've described is how we will be implementing the material economy and resource economy within Ashes. It's always been intended that you'll have these foundational kind of cross-foundational requirements at a basic resource perspective. As you described it with EVE, those are kind of always relevant. The way that becomes a true thing for Ashes is that you have what are called special resource requirements for, let's say, a processing or crafting event, and then you have general resources. Those general resources kind of graduate from tier to tier to tier, but always upon the back of the previous tier. And so for that, then you have this kind of foundational requirement for these basic resources that lives in every recipe that's constructed, so that it's still relevant for you as a high-level miner, to constantly be getting basalt, but also for a new person who can only mine basalt to still have relevance within the economy. So that is something that's outstanding. Like I said, the economy, the artisanship systems, those are going to be where we likely iterate the most on balance, numbers, and components, because it is something that we're coming in from really no player engagement on those systems, and it's more difficult to identify and isolate the balance necessary to make sure that that relationship between supply and demand is accurately hit.
Cool. That's good. I think that's a good direction, and I think it's going to be interesting to watch it play out. I'm not, it always comes down to economy stuff. Players are going to find a way to break it, so I'm interested to see if we can break it, and then you guys can fix it. We could break it, you guys can fix it. As long as there's something going on with that.
Yeah,
I think it's good.
And I'll give you an example of your foundational recipe requirements. Like, throughout crafting a weapon, you need molds, let's say, and those molds can be higher quality or even different types of mold. You can have, gold molds, you can have platinum molds, you can have adamantine molds, whatever it is, but they should require the previous foundational level resources before you can create the higher tier mold. And so the more of those things you need, the continued relevance you provide those lower tier resources because they're a part of the crafting process all the way throughout.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the economy, we can see how those materials that get consumed actually can be pulled out of the market, and then things can happen with that. Do you have any concerns currently about the economy of mounts in the game? Because once a mount is produced, it's in the game permanently. That person has it, they can trade it, it's usable forever, and it never degrades. So we end up having this really weird thing where suddenly everybody has a crocodile mount. Everyone's got one. And why would I make any more? Because everybody's got one.
Absolutely.
So
first of all, one of the newest buildings that we're going to be working on next for the node system is our stable.
Okay.
And the stable, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to take a look at our stable designs. We've talked about them in the past. Obviously, the wiki is a great resource for some of that stuff. A little bit's changed over the course of the last, I would say, year with regards to the stables design. But this is how you make mounts a little bit more scarce, even if you collect them all, right? The other thing that I've been toying with in the back of my mind, and I know on the design side at least, this can be a pretty spicy take amongst our design team. But we've been thinking about whether or not mounts have a lifespan that's determined by death. Right. And only so many deaths can occur before that mount is a carcass again, so to speak. And then they can get recycled back into the crafting economy. And so that is something, look, everybody's like, yes, do that. Yes, that, please. I guess it's not that spicy of a take.
We were talking about this pretty frequently. Yeah. Like this is the thing we were talking about as a committee. We were trying to figure out a way to make that work, and death to the mount made sense, or some kind of a food you have to fit, something consumable that would add value to somebody who's doing like animal husbandry, where they can keep producing something into the economy.
And also it provides now a choice to the player.
Yeah.
If you have 5 mounts to choose from that you're going to use, and the engagement you're going to go into that mount, or the engagement you're going to go into with that mount has a high risk of death or danger, then maybe you're not going to take out your best mount. Maybe you're going to take out your middle of the road mount, right? It's kind of now a resource that you want to make choices around and that become relevant for the strategic element of the game, right? This is now a strategy. So, that is something that I think could be interesting. I haven't quite seen a system like that, at least in an MMORPG before. I know the spicy opposite end of this argument is that players are very attached to their mount. And anytime you create, this player friction, you obviously are, eating away at the desire to play the game or punish the player. But then you have to ask yourself, with any design proposal, how does it answer your core tenets from a design perspective? And I think right now what you've described is there's no risk, right? There's no risk for the mount, so to speak. And so since risk versus reward is such a central philosophy to the game, this proposal might align a bit better with the idea of ashes.
I think that's really cool. I think anything that can make it so that mounts are less permanent, so there's still an economy, there's a reason to produce mounts. I like the idea of it having a certain number of lives, or even like maybe it dies and you can't get it back in 10 minutes, like it just pops back in 10 minutes, like you have to expend resources to revive it, something.
Or alternatively, it could be a durability system for the mount, and you don't let the mount won't die so long as it dies above 50% durability. But if you're going to not repair the mount, which can only be done at a stable or something, and it dies under 50% durability, then it has a chance to die forever. And if it reaches 0, then it's gone. There's a lot of ways that we could first implement the system, include dials and tuners that are really easy to manipulate as a part of the iterative process, and then see what lands best.
Makes sense. No, I really like that. Yeah, because we've got Halcyon, our city, is the mount production city. And something we've noticed, there's a couple of different things here that's really weird, is we have a very strange advantage because mount production is so expensive, right? Because it's 55 silver every time you want to pop even a tier 1 mount in there.
Jesus.
Right.
our node is rich, like ridiculously rich. What's up?
I was just going to say what you just described there as well. Within the animal husbandry system, there is a need to obviously potentially enhance the genetic, code of the outcome of these husbandry marriages. Even if the mount dies, it still becomes a resource. It's kind of like deconstruction for mounts, where that resource can then be reintroduced into the potential procurement of a better mount, right, or a stronger one.
Cool. No, that's actually really neat. I like the idea of the husbandry system, and I'm waiting to see more on that. We actually just got today. We finished the animal husbandry journeyman, so that's going through now on our node, which is kind of cool. So we've got the one for hunting now. We've got the one for that. Yeah, we just got journeyman done, and it'll be up in like 2 days because I think it's getting voted on right now.
You need to get all those buildings in the right spot so that when node sieges come online, I think we're doing our first test for node sieges on the PTR on January 27th, I think. Community is going to be organizing with some people who are on the PTR to stand up a 200-person node siege. So that'll be fun, but you need to get all your buildings in the prime spot of like maximum accomplishment so that when the node sieges occur, you're actually fighting for something you want to keep. And when the server loses access to that thing, it's going to radically change the environment for people and radically change people's motivations to do something different.
I can't wait for the entire server to rise up against us during a node siege, actually kill us, like kill Halcyon off, and then no one gets mounts again. Everyone back to a horse.
Oh, Margaret just corrected me. It's the 28th. Sorry.
I can't
27th,
wait.
We're doing our promotion. It's the 28th.
That's so funny, actually. So yeah, no, I think that's a really cool direction. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun, and I like the idea of having the mount-based economy be that. The other problem that I'm seeing with it right now with mounts is our node is over-rich, like way too much. We've got it at the minimum possible taxes, and we've got 3,600 gold in storage, in node storage. And other nodes are struggling to make ends meet in terms of gold production, and it's because mounts are so expensive to produce, and that's taking so much tax money, which means that's it, right?
Just wait until the node-to-node trade system becomes available for mayors, where you can now use your treasury to purchase node-specific commodities that can be traded on the node-to-node trade network, and in return give you necessary resources from successful trade completions, where you can then spend those resources on bespoke buffs and upgrades for the buildings you have. So there's going to be a need to utilize that treasury of yours that you've accumulated to purchase these commodities that then can be traded on the node-to-node trade house.
That's insane.
And then, of course, players are going to want to destroy. Like, those will look really bad. Those caravans that will be traded that are taking those trades will be very unique and looking to the node. And we are considering the idea of showing the trade caravan on the map when it's launched from the node, if it's a part of that node-to-node trade. So, like, just thinking about how many people are going to try to destroy that caravan to take the goods inside.
Dude, I'm super ready. I can't wait. That sounds like an awesome thing to be like, we're going to fire this in the middle of the night. No one will know. And the whole server shows up and blows it up. You're like, damn it. Oh, that'll be something I fire not on stream. I'm ready, under the cover of darkness. All right, so we're going to change gears a little bit, talk about guilds. So I know there's a bunch of plans for guilds in phase 3, right? One of the problems that we're seeing right now is because of the 50 member limit size, even smaller organizations are starting to have this problem where they're making multiple guilds. We actually had a problem where we shot a blue today, which is funny because we have a ally named Darkside, right? These guys are on a non-interrupted or like non-interference pact with us, which means we're not supposed to be attacking them. They're not supposed to be attacking us. We're just kind of friendly with them. And we blew up one of their caravans. But the reason we blew it up is because it was in a guild named Darker Side, because their main guild was full. And we didn't know that they had a sub-guild named that. Yep. So we're seeing kind of adverse gameplay based on the size of guilds right now. Is there any plan to revisit that before phase 3, or can we only expect that in phase 3?
Actually, we have an update that's coming on the 31st of this month. And this will be, I think, our largest update since December 20th. that has a lot of, as I described, different stuff for the desert, but is also going to contain a basic guild progression system, which will allow the guild to acquire experience, to acquire skill points, to spend those skill points on a limited subset of passive abilities that then get granted to the guild participants. With the level up, you can either choose to invest your skill points in those passives or in expanding the guild member count. So there's kind of a little bit of a dichotomy and choice there. But that'll be on the 31st.
It's actually really cool because that was the thing that was planned for much later. I'm glad that that's actually coming much sooner than I anticipated. That's cool.
So what we did was we looked at the kind of, this is what I was talking about with MMVP. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we said, hey, the guild progression systems are really kind of scheduled to be introduced as part of phase 3. But as we're playing the game, we notice this need given by what the players are experiencing. And as a result of that feedback from the players and what we believe would be good lift for minimal investment, let's take a look at that roadmap, and let's see if we can break up the MVP guild progression approach into something that's a little bit smaller, but it's going to give a lot of lift a lot faster. And so that was the first thing we talked about with the systems design team when we got back from break. And we decided to introduce that as part of the January rollout based off of the community feedback.
Cool. No, that's really good. And for those of you in chat, I saw people like, no, don't do that. It's going to lead to a Zerg meta. What ends up happening is there's always going to be Zergs in social sandbox games, but there's always going to be massive organizations. You just split them up into a bunch of different guilds, which makes it harder for guild versus guild to actually matter at that point, because now you're just getting a whole bunch of micro guilds doing that to each other, and none of it makes any sense. Right.
Well, and let's think about what the design approach here is as kind of an anti-Zerg mechanism. Mm-hmm. So,
Sir_Buttix donated $25 to
that dichotomy
charity.
I described of either choosing to invest skill points into passive vertical power gain for the members, mm-hmm. or into additional membership slots. There are, to the contrary, objectives within the game, such as owning a castle, guild halls, different types of relics that can be acquired and held that give an organization buffs and benefits, right? And so you have a choice to make. Either I can be a small, kind of close collective of skilled players, the anti-guild side, the anti-Zerg side, and I get to invest in all of these vertical power benefits of the passive buffs trees, or I can have more members get the reward from owning a relic or owning a castle or these kind of trophies that you acquire, but I'm not going to double dip. So what that does is it creates a scale where if the smaller guilds with the investment in guild passives is able to accomplish kind of skirmish size objective-based gameplay systems that accompany this and defeat the Zerg guilds, now they're double dipping in the vertical power gain because they've invested in these passives and they've acquired a castle and they've acquired a relic. So just something to think about.
That's quite cool. I think it's a lot of really interesting way of seeing that progress out. And I'd like to see the differences between a big guild and a small focus guild and seeing how that works. All right. So we're going to move on to NPCs. Are there any plans to revisit monster pathing mechanics? Because right now, in combat, if you try to escape, you can't, right? They teleport to you, and then they eat your lunch. So I know this is kind of a stopgap to stop players from just sitting there and killing a monster that can't get to them. What are your guys' plans surrounding this type of stuff for monster pathing and players getting away and allowing them to have the counterplay to escape, and also not allowing them to cheese monsters?
That's a hard question, to be honest.
2 points there. First, absolutely. There's a lot of work that's outstanding on the navigation in the game. Not just how monsters path, There are different ways that you can approach pathing. Obviously, you can cook your navigation. You have these nav meshes. You can utilize nav invokers, which are constantly kind of generating nav within the radius of the spawn location. We've chosen to go with a nav invoker approach, both for compilation times as well as server spin up benefits. But with that came some complexity. There's a little bit of granularity in how nav meshes can be generated. Some of those tiles can be really large, or some of them can be really small. The smaller they get, the more granular movement you have. And the larger they get, the opportunity there can be for seams not to quite line up and the monsters to get stuck. We were seeing monsters get stuck in certain locations because we were trying to save memory with not having so granular nav meshes available. And as a result, we had to introduce a temporary solution, which was the ability for the monsters to teleport to certain targets if they got stuck on certain pieces of terrain. Now, ideally, whenever a monster's state tree is not cycling, whenever it's not going through a particular behavior, you would have the leash function called, where the monster then returns to its original spawn point and regenerates health and is either uninteractable or can't take damage during that period of time. Unfortunately, we were compounded with the problem of we have a little bit of a complex state tree, and the leashing issue was not something that we could solve with relative quickness. So we stayed with that teleport solution. Right now, we've been able to, prior to December 20th, introduce a little bit more of that leashing behavior. We should be able to remove the teleportation within the next probably 2 sprints or so, predicated on us completing some of the navigation work that's necessary. But we do have our NPC engineers focused on the navigation solution and not having to utilize teleporting as a means to reach the player, because that can be kind of jaunting.
No, that makes sense. That's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that there's so much work going into that. And I knew that pathing was going to be so performance related. It always is. It's such a hog on the server with that kind of stuff. Are there any plans to change the system for NPC load distance? We're also seeing this with model distance in PvP encounters. We've been having trouble doing large-scale PvP because of not level of detail issues, but kind of render distance issues. And this seems to get worse in cities like Halcyon, where we just have a lot of players.
For sure. So let me give you a little bit of insight to why that's happening for your audience especially. I'm sure you know a lot of this, but from a networking perspective, our grid meshing technology splits the world up into many of these server workers, as we call them, right? And those are stitched together across this grid. Right now, that grid is static and predefined. When we are able to bring up our dynamic meshing, that grid will change based off of player movement and density. Excuse me. Currently, we have performance modes to the server workers, right? And those performance modes activate based off of that individual server worker's frame rate. And as the frame rate goes down, and obviously frame rate can go down for lots of different reasons. There's a budget there for certain things. Two of those big ones are stat replication and the component stat replication and player movement, obviously, right? Those are probably the biggest chunks. When the server frame rate goes down, we start to bring in the network call distance. And what that means is this is the distance at which your client cares about other clients, right? Or other actors that are getting replicated within the world. And because we decided to double and triple the population density of the individual realms, and in doing so, we doubled the number of server workers, we were seeing higher than average player counts across these workers that were keeping them all at this higher kind of performance mode enabled. We are doing a lot of work on the back end trying to get the dynamic meshing out of our lower branch That will solve a lot of this, because as player populations go up, those regions will get dissected into different server workers that come online or are pre-spooled up in a pool that we take from in order to kind of alleviate that server performance issue. So currently, to answer your question in a TLDR fashion, while we wait on dynamic meshing, a lot of the server workers are under stress, and as a result, we dial in the call distance to other actors. That will get changed soon, but it's predicated on us getting the dynamic meshing up and running.
Makes sense completely. Yeah, that was one of the things I was interested in seeing, is the dynamic meshing finally being in place, because, you know, having that be able to expand or retract based on how much performance is needed in that area will be very interesting. We have been reporting quite a lot of bugs of transitioning from one server worker to another, so I hope that has been helpful, because we've had some really interesting ones. I was able to duplicate my mount the other day. It was quite funny, but not actually duplicate the item, but, you know, in world.
I will say it has been very helpful. And I must give a lot of props and kudos to the goblins in chat and in your community. And obviously, as a result of your style of streaming, where, you know, much of this is giving insight to development, and you have a lot of developers within your audience as well. The quality of reports for bugs that come from your community is very, very good.
Thank you.
And so really definite kudos and props to you guys. A lot of quacks in chat. The Goblin army is doing a great job.
That is awesome to hear. Nodes. So you explained that vassalship is coming soon, and that when the vassalship system is going in, whenever it goes in, that nodes would be wiped down to 0 again. So all the work that we put in that will be gone for that. We'd like to know a little bit more about the vassal system, if there's even a timeline on when it's starting, if there's an understanding of how the system works. Does a vassal get declared automatically once a node hits a certain size? Like all of this kind of stuff.
So vassalship, I've actually deprioritized. It won't be coming in phase 2. I'm not sure if we said it would be in phase 2. It's going to be coming in phase 3 instead.
Okay.
So that is something to keep in mind. And the reason for that was because, you know, actually, I mean, it still might make it. Technically, I did a Moscow on it, and it would be I would like to have for phase 2. If it doesn't land for phase 2, it's kind of first one out into phase 3. So the reason why I did that is because what vassalship is meant to provide is a way to lock out other nodes from continuing to progress, so that the world state isn't always 100% active, right? Now, there are many methods by which you could do this to achieve that end, but vassalship seemed the most appropriate because it comes along with some other strings and relationships that get created between parent nodes and vassal nodes, right? And as we know, nodes exist within different types, categories, between economic, divine, military, and scientific, or academic. We've been interchanging kind of in those. And so you might have kind of these nation states that arrive where the capital is the parent node, and the major cities are the vassal nodes, and then you'll have these kind of hamlets or camps or whatever. That would be the X's that are stages 1s and 2s, and they are required to stay as 1s and 2s unless a spot opens up in that vassalship structure, right? And the way that spots open is meant to interconnect with our node siege system, which is how you recycle nodes and then allow the way for other nodes to advance, which will service certain different predicates that make the world state reflect that and feel different as a result, right? So it's all this kind of interconnected gear shifting of how dynamic world state is meant to kind of feed off of these multiple progression layers that are relevant to different groups of player types within the population of the game, right? So that everybody kind of has a way that they get to manipulate and change the world in some way, shape, or form. I know for many, I see some people like, my head hurts. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
This is the more complicated intricacies of game design, and especially one of a sandbox oriented, a sand park design, so to speak. So vassalship is really meant to confer certain types of benefits that might come from the node's choices in policies, or the node's choices in building types, or relics that they may own. Those give effects that are really only achievable at higher level nodes down to the vassal nodes that might be lower level. So even if they're locked out, they get benefits for being a part of that nation or part of that structure. So that's what vassalship is meant to be.
So you may even want, if you're in a smaller town, you may want to be like, hey, I'd like to be a vassal. Like I want to be a part of this. We'll give you this. It becomes a trade agreement. Yeah, no, because at that point you're gaining benefits that otherwise you wouldn't be able to attain. And you're getting, technically you get protection at that point too, because like, oh, those big guys, they're our buddies, right? And we're vassals for them.
That's correct. Yeah. And that's correct. And to be clear, this is also an anti-Zerg mechanic as well, because it creates a less exclusionary environment, which oftentimes is the bane of Zerg mindset or mentality. So to speak. It's the ability to control or to take or to own a thing, which now becomes to an extent disarmed as a result of that thing conferring benefits to those who are excluded. So that's another thing to keep in mind when we talk about Zergs as well.
I mean, wouldn't you feel that could create an even larger Zerging situation where, like, let's say you have some people in the north, some people in the south, they've created a bunch of vassals there, and on the fringe, it's everybody versus everybody from those two major factions, right? Trying to take just a little bit more.
So there are other mechanics that help to satisfy those potential issues as well. Nodes or targets become more valuable over time, right? And so while the benefit that node has from its achievements doesn't grow, the prize of taking or destroying that achievement becomes more valuable to people who may have an interest in removing it. So to a degree, there's a clock which builds on incentive for players to take certain actions.
Do you ever have an idea of what it feels like to be a returning player? Like, let's say the game is out, it's been out for a number of years, and I come back into the game, but the node that I was in has been destroyed and all of my stuff is gone. Is there ever any type of idea for some type of safe storage or anything like that? I had seen the same sort of thing play out in EVE Online before, and they made it so some of those items would go and be transported to NPC stations, and NPC stations can't be blown up. So kind of an NPC node, effectively. Yeah. So I'd be interested in knowing how you feel about that. Do you think that's a good gameplay mechanic? Is it something that you'd want to be in the game or not?
I mean, to a degree, we satisfy that mechanic. At least in the design that's outstanding in a lot of ways. So there's an in system that's meant to confer that can be accessed from the starting villages. By villages, I mean like Lionhold and Samia's Hope, where you have a warehouse available and where you can have storage chests available, and you have your personal character storage that's available. Those things are kind of safe from political systems. So that's something to keep in mind. In addition, the risk really lives within the material inventory system, not so much on the item system, nor on things like furniture, right? You can invest in completed items that furniture may be, lose a house, but still get all of the furniture back through the mail system. So there is some, as we would call it, mercy systems in place where the friction isn't so pricked, I guess. So, that's something that we can also expand on as we notice, how players interact with certain systems. One other thing to keep in mind is that when a node siege is successful and a node gets destroyed, we want to graduate that player back into citizenship as quickly as possible. We do so by applying a refugee status to the individual. At least that's intended to come along with our node sieges when they come online and we have node destruction available, one of the predicates for the node destruction system to be available is that we satisfy the MVP of our refugee system as well. So that's things like paying for your next number of weeks of dues at the new node, removing the minimum cooldown period for node re-citizenship, providing potentially options where you can participate in the ruined state of the node that you were coming from with certain buffs and or benefits to try to reclaim things at a benefit against the attackers. There are some systems that are really meant to facilitate that.
Nice. I actually really like that, and I hadn't thought of Lionhold as being that kind of safe, protected area. And to be clear, the reason I keep bringing up EVE Online, we've got a lot of people in the community that are from EVE. Many people from that community are like, I'm used to a social sandbox game. I'm really interested in Ashes. So putting in those types of terminology and asking about those types of systems is going to be really compelling for them. And I played it for years as well. So market stalls. We love market stalls. We've actually been liking them quite a lot. What are some of the ideas that you guys have for improving market stalls, improving the marketplace functionality? Because it's very bare bones right now, but we're so happy for the bare bones market stalls. Honestly, it's really nice to have at least that system in the game.
Yeah, true. And that was another MVP version. So there's a lot that needs to be done for market stalls. The team that's responsible for market stalls also has a lot to be done on the resource topics that we've talked about in the past and the artisanship stations that we talked about in the past, because that's all the econ engineering and econ design team. So they have some competing priorities. So keep that in mind. We want to obviously significantly add to the search functionality of the system so that you can search by material type. We need to touch up the UX because that was very kind of hastily done and bare bones. We want to have more granular control over the amounts of times and ways that the listings stay up. And then also we need to think about long-term how that system can share with the auction house, the intended auction house, but also service, remember, these foundations with the stall and the marketplace systems as well. So short story, we have a lot to do on UX and we have a lot to do on search functionality for the marketplace, but as it stands now, it's at least satisfying a method by which, being offline, you can actually trade goods.
Yep. That's awesome. 100%. I really like that. And I'm excited to see how economic nodes play out too, because the shared kind of marketplace system between nearby nodes that was planned. I'm really interested in economic nodes a lot for that. I love a good trade empire, trade barons.
Absolutely. That is the name of the game, the goal.
Let's go to UI. Are there any plans on making guild tags appear in the party menu? Because a lot of parties, they'll get together. They may find out that someone in their party is actually a person that their alliance is at war with, their guild is at war with, and they go, oh, God, now I got to get out of this party, even though I couldn't see it from far away. Can we have any type of UI ideas for things that are going to change for party regarding that?
Yeah, I think we had...
It's kind of low priority in my mind.
I think long ago, probably almost a couple of years now ago, we've talked about whether as part of your guild crest system, this would be a small element that lived in the party frame or the raid frame next to the name, so that you could more easily delineate via iconography the player members who would share guild with you. I think there are plans to do that in the future.
Okay. Do you guys have any plans for more chat functionality, such as being able to right-click on a name and invite, or right-click on a name and whisper?
Literally on Wednesday, I moved these sets of Jira tasks to the front of the systems engineering chat team. So our social engineers will be working on that as quickly as possible. That's going to be things like being able to right-click on a player name, being able to send them a whisper, being able to invite via the right click, simple functionality in the chat menu that's going to be to press up to cycle through previous whisper histories. There's a number of different chat functionalities that are intended, and that should be as soon as we can get it in.
I'm so excited for that, because every time I go to do like /R to reply to someone, I was like, it didn't work. or I try to link an item to somebody. I was like, oh god damn it. Or I think the funniest one is we can't roll on items. Like when we master loot something, we can't use /roll. Yeah.
I know. So to give you context again, we obviously, consider these quality of life features, obviously.
Yeah.
And so in our approach to MMVP, those are the first things that we kind of remove. This is probably borderline like min feature functionality to be considered a chat system versus not. So we stood up the most bare bones chat system that we could in the time we had, because we share those engineers obviously with other resources that we need the team to hit. But given how abrasive it's been to try to utilize the chat system, I've decided to prioritize those quality of life features.
Makes sense.
I hope that comes
How do you feel about logistics in game and explaining positioning to other players? Because one of the things that we found that's a very big point of friction is if I need your exact coordinates so we can get there in time to save your caravan, right? A lot of the, like we had a thing today where it was like, oh, I'm northwest of Steel Bloom. That, that could be anywhere. The map is big. There's a lot of place there. So what we've been having to do is hit page up, copy the coordinates down really quickly, where you have to manually type them out and then send them to another person. That's kind of weird metagamey feeling. Like, are there plans for any type of UI updates or communication updates in order to address that and give us
map waypoints, invite to party,
be like, I'm
raid.
here. Yeah, like I'm here on the map, please. Something like anything like that. Yeah.
There absolutely is. It's just been deprioed so that we could stand up the other systems. So yes, we definitely want to have a system in place where you can either share location into chat with a simple press and a cursor on the map, or where you can apply a raid mark or a waypoint marker for raids and parties, or share those locations. Those are, or send a flare. Yeah. I don't know about the flare one.
I would love a
might
flare.
see nothing but.
You might, but it'd also be really funny if like I'm in the middle of a caravan and I get attacked, and when I'm a caravan, maybe a power on the caravan to be like shoot a flare, and it's like maybe it'll attract more attackers, but
that's very true.
I would definitely be okay with I don't know. We'd have to think about the visual there, but I might be okay with us considering some in-game particle effect that's associated with the marker location and predicated on distance from the marker location might become more visible, right? That would be something I would chat with Art about. That wouldn't be too abrasive to the style of the game. We don't want a huge UI element or tech art element that's like in the middle of the world.
Yeah,
I don't know if I like that.
Here's an interesting one in terms of like counterplay and PvP related stuff. Are there any plans to counter flying mounts in a more kind of, I guess, in a better way? As a person with a flying mount, because I'm Mayor of Halcyon for that, I am finding that I am too much of a force multiplier, especially when scouting and finding targets for things like caravans. It is too powerful in the game, and there is no counterplay for the opponent. They can't really shoot me down effectively. I can escape too easily, and I can scout and find targets that are out on their own too easily as well.
I mean, to a degree, the purpose is to be a vertical power multiplier.
Yep, and it is. Yeah, I'm definitely a utility piece when I'm on a flying mount.
Yeah, the reason why it's so restrictive is because that can really only be a modifier up to, at least at the moment, 8 people on the map.
Yep.
Which means the other thing is that it's exacerbated in the power it's providing, given that the map is the size it is and not what it's intended to be.
True.
So the more playable space there is, the less of an area of effect you have available to you.
True.
There's also some tuning, perhaps, in the speed of the mount that I think needs to be done. If we really want to get a little bit more heavy-handed with us observing the effect of these force multipliers and trying to infringe or bring that down a bit, we could start talking about area of effect where the flight is capable, being, within zones of influence of vassal structures, essentially. So you can fly around your area, but, you are you're not able to fly around others. There's ways that we can play with that. I would need to see the effect that you're talking about be perhaps a little bit more pronounced within either playtest data.
Sure.
How many successful, caravans are you a part of as a mayor versus average Joe Blow who's not a mayor, so that we can both, correlate hard empirical data with the sentiment. But
so
again, objectively, the system is meant to provide that vertical power.
I'll give you a good example of this. Our server has actually started running their caravans, at least for a little while. They ran their caravan kind of behavior around whether or not I was online on stream or not, because they knew I was flying around hunting and killing caravans. So the server started to transition its timeline of when do we do caravans. Their behavior shifted because of my one flying mount.
So would you say that is an example of a dynamic world state?
I would say that, but I also felt like I was overpowered, if that makes sense. Like I didn't feel like they had an option to fight back. And I don't think that is the intention. I think there should be counterplay.
I think that there is some tuning there that we haven't touched yet. Like I said, speed is one. The mount getting killed is another. I was thinking about how mayoral mounts might have longer death timers. Obviously bigger reward, bigger opportunity should have bigger risk. So that is something to think about as well. That could be a stacking death counter that tracks over a period of time as well, like a day or two, so that it acts as kind of like a resource throttle if we need to curtail the power a bit. There's a lot of different ways that we can balance the system. So the purpose that I would say now, this is good feedback. I would observe this and I would ask the systems team, the econ and systems team, to correlate with our BI that we utilize for in-game analysis. And when we can identify that, then we can perhaps consider some of these solutions.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's really good. Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up because I know there's so much contention about this, and I was like, okay, everyone thinks they're overpowered, but are they? And I went and played it, and I was like, I'm a little overpowered now. Yeah. It's just like when the server starts shifting its behavior because one guy's got a flying mount that wants the PvP, I was like, that's a bit much,
Yeah, that won't be the intended behavior, though, for sure.
Any plans to allow a mayor to have deputies or delegates so that updates and changes can still be made while that mayor is offline or otherwise inaccessible?
Not until phase 3. I wouldn't say that they're delegates. I would say that they are council members that are not chosen by the mayor, but that have their own progression paths within certain nodes that either have buildings for this, such as a temple that's been upgraded to contain like a archbishop position, depending on the node size. There are systems that need to come online for those to be in place, but they will have separate duties, responsibilities, and privileges to what the mayor has. So there'll be a number of leaders within nodes.
So what you're saying is I can't just be a dictator. I got to get the blessing of the church now. Great. Fantastic.
It means that there's going to be some level of power delegation that is and separation of powers that is absorbed by different player progression paths.
I'm actually really into that. I'm super excited for that. Are the rates at which you level your character going to be revisited at any point? My guess on this one is it's going to be yes, but currently players massively out-level the rate at which crafters are able to level their artisanships. So we get this kind of weird behavior where artisanships, because the server is new, they level pretty slowly. They get capped by node progression, but a combat-related player is like, I'm sitting here at level 25 and I got no gear. And the only way you can really get gear is you end up getting gear from combat, from fighting humanoids. So what we end up doing is we're sitting in level 20 gear and the server can only produce like level 10 gear. And it starts creating this weird sort of disparity where they can make gear that nobody wants yet. So there's sort of an imbalance there. How do you feel about that? And what do you guys have as a plan to address this?
I would say that is an accurate assessment within the game currently. And part of the reason why I would say, again, the economy is going to be seeing some significant changes over the course of phase 2. Yeah, that is something that needs to be addressed. It's a result of some balance issues. Some of it's intentional. Some of it is too far on the kind of spread there. But it is something that is such a complicated web of interconnected requirement systems that making changes to it has to be done in a kind of holy fashion. At least to fix the level of problems it has now. The system should be durable enough where you can make changes and it not affect the whole thing. I think it is, at least structurally, but the changes that we want to see are very wide. So we're going to be seeing a lot of iteration there.
That's awesome. No, I'm super into it. So here's an interesting one. We've been seeing a lot of increase in rubber banding since the start of phase 2. Quite a huge amount, both on mounts and off mounts. Sometimes your character will get stuck and just rubber band in place for a while. Sometimes it's at a server worker border. We're wondering, like, if you can elaborate on this. What changed that may have caused this? Are you guys aware of it? Is there is it
population?
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's 100% population. There's just a lot. There's a lot of. I mean, I think we're approaching day 30. From the start of A to phase 2, and our retention is somewhere in the mid 80s, which for a test is
80% retention.
Crazy.
That's nuts.
And so we are just seeing on a daily basis a high number of concurrent users when the game is up, and especially during prime time. You'll probably notice that during prime time within the region of the server, you're going to witness a little bit less performant environment, and that's as a result of those peak users really hitting the upper limits of the server. So to answer the question, what's going to solve that or what's going to alleviate it is going to be dynamic gridding being implemented, which is why we have a high focus on getting that stood up as quickly as possible in a bug-free state so that we can promote it up. In the interim, we obviously have our networking team and our movement team also continually attempting to increase performance and optimize the network to facilitate even higher concurrencies without such visible degradation in performance.
I'm excited to see like Summoner on its own, because I always know that adds like pathing hell for the server. Like, oh, now you got minions. Now it's a player that's like 5 players. It's like, it's so rough performance wise.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Necromancer looks cool too. I like the idea that
that's always that's a big reason why a lot of games stay away, or at least a lot of MMOs stay away from big pet classes, is because of the additional both client and server performance hits.
Oh yeah. No, it makes sense completely. I remember when they started implementing summoner stuff, or like they do summoner stuff inside of Final Fantasy XIV, and a lot of the times your pet is like sitting there shooting stuff. It's not like a super run all over the place, do a lot of maneuvers and get stuck on geometry kind of a thing. And then you look at like World of Warcraft and 100 pets just go everywhere, man. Just absolutely everywhere. They run through walls, they pull a billion packs. It's just kind of how it works. So yeah, summoner or pet classes are always very difficult for that. So the big question that everyone has in their mind is rogue win. Everyone wants to know about the rogue.
Rogue win.
Everyone wants to know. We're all waiting for
Everybody's been asking the question.
There is definitely a lot of work being done. I started streaming on Twitch. That was one of my New Year's resolutions. And in my last Twitch stream, I think it was the last one, I showed the work that's been done on the dual dagger design, which is part of obviously the rogue kit rollout. And I know that all the base abilities have been stood up from design. I know that they are going through some animation iterations, and VFX and sound are going through and working on them currently. I believe that the rogue is likely going to enter into our PTR testing in some fashion on the 28th, along with the siege testing. So we're getting close. It will probably hit production, Alpha 2 environment by the end of February, I would say, before the end of February.
Nailed it.
Awesome. I'm super into that.
I was calling end of February.
Rogue. Soon, Rogue. I can't wait, and I know this is going to happen. I can't wait for the entire server to be rogues. Because that's just like the moment it drops, everyone's gonna everyone's gonna make a new rogue, and it's just gonna be rogues everywhere. You're gonna go to the starting zone, it's gonna be all level 1 rogues, dude. Like, I'm doing it. I'm ready.
That's gonna happen. That's gonna happen with rogues. It's gonna happen with summoners.
Yep.
It's gonna happen when the Pyre race comes out. It's gonna happen
with the Tolnar. Like, it's gonna be like this.
Every time you see either.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely. We saw that with the Dunir.
Yep. I'm not surprised. I was actually kind of amazed by something, and I didn't know this the other day.
Renkai for life.
Gear looks different on different races. I didn't know that because I had the same helmet as another race, absolutely. And theirs was very like normalized because they're a human, right? And mine was very bestial, which is really cool, and it was like a hyena skull with like ears on it. It was like that is wild.
Yeah, so that God.
Yeah, I've never seen that
let
done.
Let me tell you how difficult of a pipeline that was. That was from concept, excuse me, from concept to modeling to animation. Implications. That was its own thing. So 100%, and I think it's really cool. And part of the reason why I pushed for this design approach was because of some games that I had experienced in the past that I really enjoyed. Obviously, far different beast when it comes to the types of models we're talking about in armor design. But I thought that Lineage 2 did a great job with their armors, given the time frame that Lineage 2 was around. And I think it just makes sense that these meshes are different for certain more central pieces to the outfit, because the race that's donning them is inherently a different culture. So, if you're this orc-looking dude, you don't want to be seen wearing a deformed, human Kalar chestplate design. You want to have probably some type of like massive, metal piece on the chest and some ripped, tethered looking like leather components on the, stomach or whatever, because that orc, visual, that fantasy is visually different than what usually can come along with, deforming meshes across different bodies. So what I pushed for within our pipeline was this requirement that each race has different modeled armor pieces that the thematic components can be applied to, whether that be material choice, attachments, other bespoke meshes that are necessary, whatever, so that we get a more comprehensive cultural representation of these races.
Yeah, I love it. And it's one of the ththings I didn't expect, because the cost associated with doing that is immense. And a lot of people don't realize that is
immense.
If you want to make a helmet, like if you're wearing it on, a Vec, the helmet isn't just slightly differently sized. Like the same stalker helmet that I'm wearing on my Vec, on one of the other races, theirs is very smooth and it's very cut. It's very like made to be aesthetically pleasing. And the Vec one is a hyena 100%. Skull with ears going up out of it. It's a completely different model. So the cost of that is you have to get an artist to go and build that. You have to get an animator to go and fit it to the new model.
Yes.
Like you have to design it in the first place. Like it's not an easy thing to do. And that's why I looked at that and I was like, that's nuts, dude. And what it felt like to me is you guys have started a interesting standard here where the intention is nodes change their models based on the races that are involved in the node. That was a planned feature. And armor that you're wearing is changed based on the race that you're playing as well. So you kind of have a style to each of the races, and their environments have a style based on what races live there.
Absolutely.
And I just think it makes me feel like I have ownership over that sort of a style. And like when I see other people, I was like, oh, that guy's another Vec. Look at him. We're so brutal looking, And I just think it feels good. Yeah, no, it feels good for the character. And it's one of the things that we do kind of like done. I love it. Like it's one of the things we do in like World of Warcraft for that is with transmog, right?
everything you just described is the reason I got pushback about this approach.
Did you actually?
So, from a production standpoint, everything you just described is
it's
accurate.
A nightmare. It's a nightmare. Yeah.
It is a nightmare to achieve, but if you achieve it, all the benefits you just talked about is why you take the approach. There's another side to this also. That's not just the production of these things, but also the technical overhead and performance concerns that can happen now when you have to have, multiple different sets of textures based off race, or a higher vertice count based off of different meshes that are being used, which of course Unreal does very well. But we also had to stand up a unique technology for this outside of the box kind of mesh merging approach for our character models, so that from a client rendering perspective, it wasn't as of a performance hit. So there's a whole host of technical constraints and concerns, pipeline production concerns that go along with, not just taking a more standard deformation approach across the races.
No, I think that's fantastic. And I think the thing that I'm most interested in is normally to achieve that kind of a feeling. Like I'd want to look like that. I'd go and have to farm a whole bunch of different items and maybe piece them together and things like that. But with this, it's like anything that I put on is going to look interesting based on my race and the heritage for that race, which I think is cool. And I'm interested in kind of exploring that out because I want to play the Nikua once they come out, which is the more like beach dwarves. We call them California dwarves.
Absolutely.
So excited for that. Right. And I kind of want to see what the armor sets look like for them now. I want to see what their towns look like for them. Like this adds to a bunch of really interesting exploration where you may see a person in gear and you're like, what is that? That looks cool. And it's crafted for them,
Another thing that's you mentioned the Nakua. I think it's the Nakua and the Pyre that are next up for implementation. I can't remember, but the Nakua are the islander kind of a more Polynesian influenced dwarves, which I haven't really ever seen be done before.
I haven't either. I was like, beach dwarves, I'm in, dude. Like,
I've never seen that. And I just thought it was such a cool representation of this unique cultural perspective to a standard kind of fantasy approach. That was really cool. So, and also it just makes sense in our expansion into the tropics, right? That we're also coinciding the Nakua there.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm excited for that. We love the tropics. We actually took Halcyon specifically because we wanted to expand into the tropics and like do the PvP stuff in there and actually have fun with it. So like we're right on the border to it and we're ready to go. Excited for when that area becomes available. Will players eventually be able to run their own shops with supply and demand orders like the mayoral system, i.e. a furniture shop where I can buy orders for nails as an example. So I can set out buy orders, people can fulfill those buy orders.
Yes, that is expanded functionality that's intended to be part of the stall system, where your shop can be set up for purchase by quantity, by amount and value, but also Taverns. To sell stacks and individual purchases as well. That's still outstanding.
How do you feel that treasure finding has gone so far? Do you think that it is good for the in-game economy? Do you think that the feature feels good for a player? Do you have any ideas about how this would want to be expanded in the future or changed?
They know what I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, first, there's still some bugs that need to be addressed. I think we need to have a better art implementation for the mound as well. I think that we're missing some features, which is like first UI treatment on the system, the timer system, the ability to spawn certain events at the location as well that might act as potential challenges to overcome, such as 1 or 2 star mob that's random, or some other type of challenge. But what I think it does well is it provides an alternative method of resource generation into the economy that can also be throttled depending or sampled against a rate or value from the artisanship service that passes down that information. And I think that it plays towards a unique player style, which is, the more wanderlust, more adventure, more time risk type playstyle. So I think that
Casual.
from a core gameplay loop perspective and from a gameplay layer perspective, we're hitting them in viable, and now we need to polish and flesh out the system.
It's very cool. Will ashes piles on the ground ever show guild affiliation and node affiliation? One of the problems we're running into is that in order to make sure that we're not accidentally looting our own guildies, they got to go look them up in Discord, which is not ideal.
Oh, you mean for the loot UI to contain guild affiliation? That would probably be, yeah,
because we don't want to steal from our own guildies, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, we want to probably include that as part of the loot container info.
Yep. We already talked about quantity and
place. It could also be a proper place to use the guild icon that we talked about for the raid frames or the party frames.
That would be a cool thing to do. Yeah, because I think that's one of the biggest things is like I go to loot somebody and I'm like, is this guy a guildie? I have to go search it in Discord and I'm like, I don't see the name there. All right.
We could use the guild crest in that place as well and probably have a hover state where it shows the guild name when hovered over. Here's a
very large one. Win more nodes.
Win more nodes. Yeah. That is a good one. So the next set of nodes that will be coming online will probably be in the tropics, and then they'll be in the lower portion of the Sand Squall Peninsula. So I think that is probably going to happen around the end of phase 2.
Wow. Okay.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
That's a while.
Is there any chance that we will be able to somehow influence or impact the timings of wars? As an example, I know it's based off of server defense time, like server peak hours times. But is there a chance or an opportunity for defenders or offense to choose time areas in any way? Because as it stands, it's always going to be 8 p.m. PST on our server, which our server is like across a lot of people from a lot of different regions. We're never going to be all meet that. I can't go to that.
There was some thought I had a while ago that depending on the war scroll type, you could have different war scroll types that prompt the opponent to agree upon a time. Those war scrolls might even be cheaper or have a different material vertical to acquire. And that way you can have kind of a scheduled war event.
I feel like if that was the case, I would never use it, unfortunately. And the reason why is it would give the defender an advantage, if that makes sense. But I do like the idea of something that adds an option.
Think about, I feel like if you had that option, it would almost be like a mic drop moment where you're like, I'm going to give you this advantage. Take the first punch, kind of a thing.
Yeah, good luck. I like that. That's kind of a cool way to do it. Chat really wants to know when our wish is going to happen. The ferret wish.
Oh, that's...
the ferret wish. You know what? You know what's funny? I think we actually have a ferret cosmetic that we did long ago.
Did you actually?
And I'm pretty sure it was a flying ferret. It was like a ferret with butterfly wings.
I could just get them to buy that, right? Is that still
no, you can't.
A thing? Damn it.
It's not available. No. But I'm pretty sure because I literally I can remember the concept in my mind. Yeah, almost like a luck dragon ferret.
Put that on the store. They'll buy. Look at them. Look at them all. They want them. Look at them. They say, take all my money. Look at them. I would buy it.
That's the problem, and that's why companies do it.
Give us the ferret fly. Yeah, exactly.
That's why companies do it.
Was the caravan system inspired by Silk Road Online in any way?
No, it was not. The caravan system
or Lineage
was inspired by. I mean, I don't know if it was inspired really by anything. What I enjoyed about ArcAge as a system was that you could have these packs that you would move by merchant shipper tractors. So in a sense, that vehicle transit is one thing, but you couldn't componentize the tractor. You couldn't add abilities to it. It wasn't a roaming PvP zone or event, that came with it. So I guess in a sense, the reward for transit, I really enjoyed that about Arcage. And then, building the system from a like resource requirement transit, and how it intersects with like node to node trade system. The Caravan in that sense is very unique. Even in Silk Road, the way caravans were used were not to satisfy, system-driven reputation and events. So, trying to find a unique space for how these nodes interact together. The Caravan is wholly unique in that sense.
Is there any plan for something akin to artistry from Arcage?
What is artistry?
In a sense, we do have plans to have user-generated compositions for bard melodies. So in the sense of the profession and how it existed in Arcage, no, not so much. But there is a desire to implement some user-generated musical compositions.
That's cool. I like that, and I can't wait for somebody to run by on a bard while playing Rickroll, because I know it's going to happen. Like, that's going to be the first day that anything like that exists. It's just going to be Rick Astley blasting past me. Oh, we kind of wanted to know, we've been looking at the solar system up above, right? We've been seeing all these different celestial bodies, and we noticed, and Kronos noticed this, but we haven't really looked at it empirically yet. Does the sun set differently each day as the seasons go further? Like, is it rotating around the horizon? Because it looked like it was.
What?
We don't know. Like, Kronos was like, I think it looks a little bit different. Yeah.
Does the skybox emulate the seasons? Yes, it does, I believe. So I believe it goes around at its epigee based on the season, right? So we as you can see in the game world, you see these different seasons. I would have to double check with environment, but I believe it does. In the game world, we have these 4 different seasons, and that does change the location of the sun, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, because Kronos said it, and I was like, I think you're right about that, but I wanted to ask, because we've seen a gigantic planet. We've seen like a moon that's exploding with lava. We've seen a moon. We've seen the sun, and I think we've seen a faraway planet too. So there's like a whole bunch of stuff up in the sky.
Margaret posted the image of the ferret. If you want to look at it, it's in Discord.
Where is it? Oh no, I can't get to Discord right now. Can you post it in chat? You spam it in chat and do that.
There it is.
Whoop, there you go.
That's
so that is
cool.
what that looks like. Yeah, it's freaking awesome looking. So that's really cool.
A little weird.
I love the idea of having like,
legs.
Yeah, it's little tiny feet, and it's got all this elemental kind of stuff going through it, like all the fall season through that. The ears as well, kind of like fall leaves.
Oh, we should move that up in our production.
Yeah,
Margaret, remind me on Monday we should move that up on the character production. They can model that soon.
I love the idea of elemental animals and things in the game like that. Do you guys have any plans to have those change with the seasons as well, or is it kind of locked to a specific element?
Yep. They already showcased that.
We have certain NPCs that we've taken through season changes. The Kirin are one of them.
Bears.
And so are the cats. I think we've done it with the cats and the snow leopards. They change from like a savanna to a leopard version. So we do have plans, but I think that is something that probably we won't see until later in phase 3.
That's awesome. Yeah,
with other creatures.
I've been showing off a lot of the changes for the environments for seasons, and people have been blown away by it. Like, it's just really cool to see, like, oh, I logged in today and there's more snow, and there's more snow, and there's more snow, and you just keep watching that transition over time, and it's very cool, especially with the seasons only being 15 days. Is that kind of the idea for launch? Do you guys think that is a good amount of time? Like right now is 15 days for a season?
Well, the other thing that's not really, or I think it actually is, the seasons, I don't know if they're informing the resource spawners yet. But
I don't think
the intent there obviously is that seasons also affect growth rates. And so different zones will be at different seasons, and we'll be able to grow different types of crops at different speeds based off of that. So your freehold location is really going to be important based off of the types of season the zone can have and the speed of those things. Now, as a constant, I think that 15 days is probably within the ballpark of where we want to stay. However, there are in-game effects really that can change that constant and based on location, such as certain relics that might increase the speed of transition from season to season, or permanently set the season of a zone to a certain value. Those are things that, also play into this sand park philosophy.
I will say there is.
You just want to play it, but you don't have the money yet? Then wait. Yeah, it's one of the things I keep telling people is if you don't think that it is a good purchase yet, or you don't think that you have enough finances for it yet, and you feel like, oh no, I got to buy this now, just wait. Just wait. It's early days. Also
a good gut check when you think about whether you really want to play is if you put it in the context of saying, I want to play, then you're probably not wanting to test.
Yeah.
And right now, this is very much a test, not a game yet. And part of, I think that difficult balance sometimes is the game feels less like a test at certain times than other times.
One moment.
Phase 3, we're going to see a lot of progress towards the bugs that still exist and the performance of the game. So you lose nothing by just participating as a viewer, giving your feedback on the systems and experiences that you're watching, that you're still able to be a part of the development. And then we don't have a box price when we launch. So that's something that you can continue to look forward to.
Somebody actually sent another image for ferrets on this, and it's this. So you can actually see these two. That's the same model, but more, I believe that's the in-game model at that point.
Oh,
Looks
yeah.
like
Oh, that is the in-game model. Zoom in on that. Did we already model this?
This looks like the in-game model, yeah, because you can see the geometry on it there. That looks sick.
Oh.
Little feet.
We did model this. Margaret, we need to get this rigged and animated.
You can see the little leaves on the edges of that. It looks rad.
I want to fly around as this guy. I want to monster coin it, just to kind of fly around in the world from branch to branch.
That looks rad. Hell yeah.
The animators are crap, man. They're so good.
Already.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a massive game. You got a lot of people working.
Really
How many developers do you guys have now, by the way? How big is the team?
I think we have a little over
230.
I think we're a little over 230 now.
Damn.
And we're about to move into our next hiring phase.
Really?
Yes.
Well, we've got a pretty massive community, so if you guys are looking for any positions to be filled, let us know. We'll go put it in the job opportunities channel, and I'm sure you will get quite a lot of interest. Quite a bit.
And absolutely. So intrepidstudios.com is where we kind of are going to be hosting the open positions. If you're an engineer, if you're a tech artist, if you're a designer, applying, absolutely. We have a great recruitment team that will treat you well through the hiring process and through the interview process. It's a difficult spot right now for the industry, but there is some silver lining in it for us in the sense that there's a lot of amazing talent that's available right now. And we want to do our part in helping out as best we can because the project is pretty awesome and we're pretty excited about it.
That seems like it's everything. It was lovely having you on to talk. Is there anything else you wanted to tell chat?
Nope. Just keep doing you, chat. The best bug reports, as I said, we're getting from your community. Love it. You're helping to make the game better every day, and we're not going to stop doing our part in delivering bug fixes and content as we move throughout the alpha. And Thor, you keep doing you, buddy. You're doing a great job, I think.
Well, thank you very much.
Educate, helping to create and foster a great community.
Oh, you rock. And thank you very much. And you guys keep it up, too. It's really cool seeing the throughput being so fast. That's not what I'm used to at all. Usually these kind of changes don't go through this quickly. And you guys are burning through your roadmap very quickly, which is cool.
Awesome.
So rock on.
Thank you, guys.
Well, I will talk to you later. See you around.
Later.